Hello readers, well, here we are again. This is my third YouTube, and this time we're talking about sneering snobs as featured in Scruffy Chicken. In 1965 I lived in Detroit, but I enjoyed an extended cycling holiday in Britain. I was taken to the Friary Hotel in Derby. In those days it was an exclusive meeting place for homosexuals, upper class homosexuals. The elite Derby camp, as we call it. David was my guide. He affected a cut glass accent. I remember, for example, during a picnic, some curious cows came up, disturbing us. No, go away, go away. And then there was another occasion when a man alighted from a Rolls Royce and said to his wife, "Come on, duck, hurry up." "Oh dear," commented David, it would have to be the self-made time. On entry to the Friary there seemed soft silence and darkness. Eventually the eyes adjusted to dim lighting, revealing a large Georgian emptiness. Empty except for a group of shadowy, besuited gentlemen standing near the bar. Gradually I discerned a low murmur of ornate voices in conversation. Yes, indeed, cry, yeah. David and I approached this gathering. All eyes were inclined to a big man, slightly stocky, wearing a sneer on his aquiline profile. It was a classic face, yet I was utterly repelled by an artificial slimy drawl. Words were exhaled in a breathy whisper. The sibilance of voice was matched by a sickening softness of body. "Hilary Raymond Hawley," whispered David sardonically in the style of a grand announcement. "He's HRH to the bitchy Nottingham camp. He has an extensive knowledge of royal families, past and present. He knows all the royal highnesses and all the serene highnesses. It fascinates him." Addressing the gathering, he was holding court with a narrative frequently interrupted by a sort of nervous laugh, a forced laugh. Kind of a nauseating wheeze, which accentuated his aristocratic sneer. "He's number 2, added David. "Watch out, he's powerful. Not one to be crossed, or it could mean social death." And then he said, "Have you identified the boss?" Well, you know, at the moment of entry, I had indeed identified the top man. About a dozen pair of eyes were on him, ever looking for approval. The most striking aspect of Claude Hoadley, the first homosexual of Derbyshire, was his posture. Possibly this gave him that indefinable air of authority. Hoadley was bolt upright, straight as a pole, always. To this stern schoolmaster, slouching was a sin. And in that room, every person appeared to be affected, appeared to be standing at attention, in dread of imminent reprimand which might shoot out like a whiplash. "Straighten up there, boy! How dare you loll in front of me? Such disrespectful drooping is indicative of an indolent and disorderly mind." He had sharp, clear-cut features with shrewd, cold grey eyes and cruel lips. Hoadley's suit was distinguished by its superb cut. He was the very quintessence of good taste and excellent grooming, from the top of his perfectly combed hair down to his highly polished, expensive shoes. Everything about Claude Hoadley was correct, and those around him seemed to be anxious to approach his high standards. I was very impressed when this paragon broke into speech. I, a lowly Derbyshire teenager, in awe of an extraordinary accent. If David's cut-glass diction had been impressive, this Hoadley orgy of enunciation, such high art of lavish articulation, was more impressive. Do you know, it hit my Derbyshire ear like a thunderbolt. There was one word in particular which was drawn out with striking embellishment. After became very southern, sounding like after. I noticed that on a walking holiday. We had one or two holidays. Very often in the field somewhere, some peasant leaning on a spade or a fork, he would say, "How do?" And Hoadley would respond with, "Oh, how great. Good afternoon." In a youth hostel, he was holding court, mesmerising his admiring listeners with impressive vowels. And there was one woman, never forget this, one woman said, "Oh, I say, Gertie, oh, doesn't he talk nice? Oh, I could listen to him all day." And following a long, hard walk on that same day, I was cold and starving. I was desperate for sustenance, and I pointed to this gong and I said, "Surely the warden will ring that. Well, it must be dinner time." I was very hungry. And Hoadley responded, "Oh, Narvel, no need to strike the gong. No, we're all so hungry. We're here." And all heads nodded. Friday night at the Friary was a ritual for Claude's retinue of elite homosexuals. Class-conscious values were communicated subtly. Yes, members of the club were encouraged to appear to be at all times inwardly assured, stable, smug, even arrogant. And I was experiencing a sort of culture shock. Because unlike in Detroit, in Derby, discussion of money was considered vulgar. Unearned income, unearned privilege was admired, and American pushiness deplored. Steered by Hoadley and Hawley, the conversation meandered around various subjects, but the correct code of conduct came out loud and clear. Manual work, technical skills, people in trades, self-made types, and all manner of doers were to be despised by this entourage of nodding heads. I often reflect on that elite of Derby queers. As they called themselves, this is before the word gay came into general use. You were either queer or you were normal. Horrendous. Anyway, oppressed people, to make their own position safer, felt the need to denigrate other human beings, being regarded as inferior in the British class structure. And these were the sad folk I described in Scrubby Chicken. Affected professionals, fearful, timid men trying to survive in the homophobic dark ages of Derby in 1965. A time when gay people tried to be invisible. A time when desires were repressed, were illegal, were a deep, dark, dangerous subject. I'm referring to things like blackmail, of course. Claude Hoadley was now in full flow anyway, holding full attention, denouncing the Beatles. They'd just been awarded the MBE. "It was an honour we should all aspire to," he said. "But I ask you, what can we expect from a Labour Prime Minister? Outrageous. Utterly, utterly outrageous. That Canadian Member of Parliament, Hillary, what was his name? Hector Dupuy, replied the effeminate and effete Hilary Raymond Hawley. Yes, of course, yes. Yes, that man is quite right. They are vulgar nincompoops. Mr. Dupuy has been cheapened. A gentleman of his position. He spat out the next sentence with gathering fury. He's been debased to the level of common working-class ruffians. I applaud his action in returning his insignia to the palace. I would have done the same. Here, here. All heads nodded. Yeah. Quite right, Claude, quite right. And nobody in that gathering dared mention that Claude had never received an honour of any kind. Even David enunciated more carefully, more formally in the regal presence of Claude Hoadley. Anyway, there came a point when the lofty, shrewd eyes came to rest upon the scruffy youth who stood at the side of David. The tone was clearly sharp, clearly cool, and censorial. Good evening, David. The soup's on late perhaps this evening. I see you appear to have acquired a young person. May we know the name of this new acquisition? Evening, Claude. Well, no. This is Narvel. He lives in Detroit, but he's as English as the rest of us. Indeed, replied the pedant. What part of England, may one ask? Horsley Wood House. I said it carefully and slowly, pronouncing both H's in Horsley Wood House so carefully and so slowly that it sounded like a foreign place in my own ears. That smug gathering knew only too well that the rough lad before them was much more accustomed to saying Horsley Wooders. I winced under the slimy sneer of Hilary Raymond Hawley, who emitted one of his numerous breathy Back in 1963, when I had just arrived in the US, as a novel curiosity, I was invited to the local high school to address a class there. And there were clean-cut, all-American hunky boys sitting out there, you know, and yelling out different things. Greetings, England! Welcome to the USA! Hi, buddy! How you doing, Englishman? That kind of stuff, you know, taking the mickey a bit. Anyway, questions were asked. All went well until I started to describe my house. Oh, well, you see, we don't have houses like yours. Our houses touch it next house. You know, like a sort of all houses in a row like. Now, my mate, Horace, he got a nice house. This produced a sea of shocked faces. Half a second later, there was an explosion of loud guffaws. And from these various raucous males. Anyway, the teacher came to the rescue. An important clarification. Narvel, perhaps you'll run that past us again. I think you're referring to the building in which you live, if I'm not mistaken. No sweat, nothing wrong with the way you talk. If these kids were better educated, why, they'd know that the French don't sound the H either. I think you were referring to Horace's house. Back to the friary. Something was said against a new progressive canon at Derby Cathedral, attempting to modernise the service or something, anyway. But I couldn't believe it. They go to church, I whispered to David. I was shocked. Homosexuals going to church. My dear boy, said David, you have so much to learn. They practically own Derby Cathedral. I'm surprised the whole congregation don't rise when Hoadley and Hawley make the grand entrance. It's the same every Sunday. The great and good of Derby sit near the front. Always in the same order. First, Miss Bulstrode sits next to Hoadley. She's the headmistress of the prestigious Derby High School for gals. she chats with him in Latin and Greek. Then we have Hawley, who sits next to the Tweedy, Miss Penelope de Haviland, the editor of Derbyshire Life and Country magazine. I think they exchange bits of gossip about the Lord High Sheriff and who's the other one, the Lord Lieutenant. Oh well, so much for Snobs. People ask me, why on earth did you call it Scruffy Chicken? Well, the title is more of a comment on the snooty snobs who made me feel scruffy. Scruffy accent, scruffy education, scruffy friends, scruffy table manners, and so on. You know, looking back half a century, it's a long time now, it seems to me that the ultra-polished diction of nodding heads was an attempt to compensate for the low status of gays in general society. I'd guess that most of Hoadley's devotees came from humble origins, like me, in a pit village existing in a primitive terrace cottage. In the 1950s, there'll be precious little difference between an £8 a week coal miner and a cotton picker in a place like Mississippi or somewhere like that. Yet, to uplift their lowly status, black homosexuals in Detroit drove around in huge, beautiful automobiles with awe-inspiring fins. You've all seen those, I think. At the same time, most of my relatives, with coal black faces after a day labouring in the bowels of the earth, that's before Pitt had baths, well, they went home on push bikes. So there you have it. My African-American friends asserting their status, swanking at the wheel of a Lincoln Continental or what else, Cadillac. And Claude Hoadley's gang in Derby asserting their superiority with effective vowels trying to sound like royalty. You know, I really do think there is a strong link between them.